This is the MIAA Weekly.
Welcome to yet another edition of MIAA Weekly. I am Matt Witwicky, joined by the best expert I could find out there for the MIAA, Jon Dykstra. Jon, how are you doing?
Not too bad. We haven't been canceled yet, so it's a good start to the
Well,
week.
we still got plenty of weeks for that to happen.
Yeah.
But
Our picks might have been canceled by now. But
well, yeah, hopefully no one's going to Vegas with your picks, but that's another story, and we'll get to that later. Let's go ahead and pull up a little bit, if we can, some of the results from this last week. We're going to go into a little bit more detail, with some than others, but, in taking a look here, we didn't have any real crazy outcomes, Jon, but the league, though, is, I think, still becoming really unpredictable as we move forward.
We didn't have any crazy outcomes in terms of who we thought would win the game, but we had some crazy ways to get there with that UCM game against Davenport. I think that was closer than a lot of people thought. And then Emporia and Missouri Western was a lot closer than a lot of people thought, going to overtime, and we'll talk more about that later, but being so close to pulling that upset for the Griffins. So even Pitt State and Washburn, like there were some tight games in there. So it was an interesting week.
It looks like Washburn's going to battle this year, but let's go ahead and start off with our athletes of the week. What do you got here for our offensive guy?
Yeah, Gunnar Gundy. I mean, Emporia State quarterbacks winning Offensive Player of the Week's nothing new. Throwing 74 times in a game might be something new. I'm guessing he was in the ice bath quite a bit today and yesterday, but 49 of 74 for 454 yards, 3 touchdowns, and they needed all of it in an overtime win over Western. So Tyler Common, he's a special player at receiver for him too. I feel like anytime Gunnar gets it, Tyler has a good case as well. But just a really good passing attack and not a surprise from Coach Higgins' squads.
Defensively, there was a few names up for it that I think probably could have gotten it, but we have Noah Blair from UCM. Why did he get it, Jon?
Yeah, I mean, he had a late pick to pretty much seal that win over Davenport. He had 3 tackles in the game. So the pick was really the main thing. I will say we've questioned in the past how Central's defense is coming along, and they gave up 31 points, but that's a season high for Davenport this year. So we're still working our way there with UCM's defense, I think, but they've also played some tough competition already. So I would nominate. I was a little surprised. Maybe it's just the games I go to every week, but Shane Fredrickson from Northwest had a pick 6 and a blocked field goal, the only time Southern crossed midfield against the Bearcats. So yeah, it's a little more interesting with the 1-point game than the 59-point game, though. I understand why the MIAA went that route.
On special teams, Karsten Arndt got it. What did he do to get the accolades?
7 for 7 total, 3 for 3 on field goals, and then 4 PATs. That's a solid day. Nice little bounce back win for Fort Hays that we'll talk about later. But Fort Hays is a good team, and he's a solid kicker. And the guest we'll have on pretty soon. We'll hope he's not quite as solid this week, but a good week whenever you're 3 for 3 on field goals.
Almost offering a spoiler in the midst.
Almost. You have to wait. Pins and
boy, I tell you, the tension. So what ended up being the game of the week, Emporia State ends up outlasting Missouri Western. Let's go ahead and watch a little bit of the highlights that we have here on this one. And all smiles there in Emporia, and Gunnar Gundy letting it go early here and just letting it rip. And all of a sudden, they're on their way to 102 plays that they ran in this contest. And, we thought this would be a decent game here, and it certainly was. There's your guy, Brandon Hall, getting loose, going for a score. And once he gets past, you're not getting him. And Emporia trying to get more here, and a little fumble. And, they had a little bit of that challenge with some turnovers in this one. we're now moving a little bit further into the game. Gundy's looking for his man. All of a sudden, you mentioned him a moment ago, Tyler Common. It wouldn't be Emporia highlights without showing Tyler Common. So, he gets him there once, John, and then if you didn't catch all of it, there was a replay there, but then he gets him again, on the fade. And we've got ourselves a real tight ball game going in here late. We're going into overtime. Emporia makes their field goal. Then you got Mo West at the goal line here, and they're trying to score, and they get a chance to go for the win here. Ball gets thrown on up, a little bit of loft on it, and we can't come down with it. Emporia escapes with the win. So, quite. I thought it was going to be a close game. I didn't think it would necessarily be like that, John. So, what do you walk away with this one, buddy?
Yeah, it was a little bit more lopsided, I think, than obviously the overtime, and the results indicate turnovers just killed Emporia in this one. Way too many, but they outgained them by over 100 yards. They obviously way outpassed them. They missed, I believe, 3 field goals in there. So they made the one when it counted and would end up winning the game, though. So it's kind of a survive and advance type thing for Emporia. I see right here. This is not the prettiest game they're going to play all year, despite those insane numbers from Gunnar Gundy. But they got the win. Whenever them and Western play, it's always a really good game. I feel like them and Western play, and then Western and Hayes play back to back almost every year, and it's always tight between in that little round robin. So as you can see in the box score, there are 20 points for Western the second quarter, the only quarter they won, and they almost were able to carry that and were fingertips away there from carrying that into a win. But a solid performance from Western, who struggled a little bit this year, but at the end of the day, Emporia stays undefeated, and that's what's going to matter when we get to postseason and standings time and deciding that playoffs.
Well, let's get on to our next big contest. Central Oklahoma going against the Nebraska Kearney team, who was kind of looking to keep the ball rolling here. We've got some highlights from this one as well. Let's go ahead and roll that UCO footage that we've got. You're going to see right here, Reagan Jones gets loose here for Kearney and heads on in for the score. He's always been able to make some plays with his feet, shows it right there. And then they go ahead and they're able to hit another touchdown here in the end zone. They're up 14-7 in the first half, and they're feeling pretty good about how this one's going. As the game kind of progresses here, you're going to go ahead and see, Central Oak goes ahead and scores right there, and then we get a really weird play. We get a pick here that happens right near the goal line. We end up backing up and getting ourselves too far back, and we have a safety that kind of changes the momentum here in the third quarter. And from here on out, it was all, Bronchos from here. And you're going to go ahead and see some of that with, a guy that we're going to talk about here shortly as we go see Jet Huff doing his thing. A guy who's
Davis there too.
Exactly. So they go ahead and ride this one on out, end up winning the game 32-17. I think this was one that was a little bit misleading because if you really look at it, Central Oklahoma, 437 yards to 255. They were able to hold Kearney to under 100 yards in the second half. And I thought kind of went going away. Didn't you feel that way, John?
Yeah, I mean, I just talked about the turnover bug for Emporia kind of hurting them and making that game closer, and it was really the case in this one too. It was even more lopsided in terms of yards. UCO almost doubled them up in yards, or had almost 200 more total yards than they did. UCO played really well. It was just that turnover bug that kind of bit them a little bit, but I'm sure we'll get more into that here in a couple minutes. But yeah, they ended up pulling away, and same thing for 3 quarters. Maybe it wasn't the prettiest game, but they got the win. And Kearney was an undefeated team. It's not. They were picked last in the polls. They had a good win over Northwest. They were playing some good football. So it's definitely a good win for UCO, and the Broncos stay undefeated as we go into another big test for them this week.
They sure do. And along with that, we are joined by Adam Dorrel down in Edmond, Oklahoma. Coach, how are you doing?
I'm great. How are you guys?
We're doing good, but we're not sitting out on our deck like you are. We don't get this from everybody, Coach. I like the style you got going here.
I appreciate it. We had some rain the last 2 days, and it's finally cooled off down there in Oklahoma. So it's like 70-something degrees. So I got a fire going, and got the football games on, and pleasure to be with you guys.
Well, we appreciate you making time. Coach, you end up being tied at 14 in your game. Tell us a little bit about that conversation with your guys at half and kind of what transpired after that.
Well, yeah, it was a tough game. The thing I was proud of our guys on is, it's been no secret. We haven't tried to hide behind it. But, going into year 3 here, we've never beaten a team on the road with a winning record. And so we were ecstatic to go up and get a win against a team that was undefeated at the time. Kearney's a hard place to play. It's a 6.5-hour drive for us, and I think they have a good football team. I think they're well coached. I think their guys play hard, and they came out and got on us early, and I was just proud of the way we responded and came back. Like you guys said, I think the big thing is we don't feel like we played our best football. We had a -3 turnover margin, and like I told our guys Sunday, I think if you went through all levels of football, whether it's, NAI, D3, D2, FCS, FBS, pro football, I'd love to know the margin of a team that won with a -3 turnover margin. I bet it's probably less than 20%. So
sure,
you got to feel good about that. Obviously we got to get that fixed. You can't have a -3 turnover margin and expect to win every week. But a lot of good things came out of it. Like I said, it was a good road win. I thought we showed good maturity, good poise. And then, I think the thing I've been saying is I feel really strongly about our depth and our conditioning. And I just feel like our guys have really put in a lot of hard work in the off season, and we're really deep at multiple positions. And I think that showed in the fourth quarter. We scored 16 points and held them to 0.
Coach, I guess I'm going to take the low-hanging fruit question that you've probably been asked a lot about, but the new guy, Jet Huff, having him obviously had a huge game 2 weeks ago against UCO, but 291 yards last week too. Just talk about, first of all, getting him into the program, selling him on that vision, and what you've seen from him through these first 3 games.
Yeah, so I've known about Jet since he was a sophomore, junior in high school. Actually, at my previous school I was at, we were recruiting him and knew about him. He was on our board, and then came to UCO, and we offered him, had him up for an official visit, and he decided to go to the University of Houston. His dad was a longtime Oklahoma high school coach. They still have family in Edmond, property in Edmond, and so, things weren't working out for him at Houston, and we brought him up at the end of last season, and he decided to come, and we've just been really pleased with him. He's a coach's kid. I think he makes great decisions. He's just a competitor. He's just a gym rat. The thing that people have asked me, who do you compare him to? I said I compare him to guys like Josh Lamberson that I coached, Kyle Zimmerman, Trevor Adams, guys like that. He reminds me a lot of those guys. Just Joel Osborne, really high football IQ. Great leader, guys rally around him, and just we're just really proud of him. He continues to work really hard, and we think his best football is still ahead of him.
Pretty good list to be compared to right there.
Coach, obviously it's easy for everybody to be looking at all the production you're getting at the quarterback position. Mm-hmm. But you guys are also running the football pretty effectively. Yeah. And, we've got William Mason and Jaden Cottrell, who those two Both guys are 6'2". One of them's a little bit more of a receiver body. One's more of a big runner. Tell me a little bit about what dynamic they bring and how your offensive line has kind of helped out as well.
Yeah, let me start with Cottrell. I'm so proud of that young man. When we came here and took over the program, he was currently in the program, and I just felt like there was a lot of negative connotation with him. He was a receiver, and it was a lot of, well, he can't do this, he can't do this. We moved him to running back. You know, we do a in-house testing, and I've done it for years, but he's the second guy on our team, pound for pound, is the strongest guy on our team. You know, when we got here, he was around 178 pounds. Last year, he was up to 192. He's currently hovering right in that 215 range. And he can run. He can flat run. And, you know, just really proud of him. I know going into last week's game, productivity was down a little bit, but he was averaging before that almost 10 yards a carry. And so it's not just those two guys. You know, we've got Carney, who's currently battling a little bit injury. He'll be back this week, Andrew Carney. And so we just feel like we feel really strongly. We got three guys we can hand the football off there too. And so, you know, with what we're doing with tempo, it's great to have three guys that you can plug and play. And, you know, the thing I love is they're very unselfish. Sometimes in that running back room, you know, those guys want to have 35, 40 carries a game. And I just don't think that's realistic. And those guys are each other's best asset and best friends. And they're really rallying around each other. And, you know, just those guys are running really hard right now.
Well, with the speed and physicality of football these days, having a few running backs who can go ahead and get double-digit touches is a real nice luxury for you to have.
For sure.
Now, kind of moving to the other side of the football, Coach, I couldn't help but notice your top 5 tacklers are all Oklahoma kids.
Yeah.
So you got a little bit of a blueprint going with, you know, having a great, you know, local, you know, roster. So tell me a little bit about how things are going on the defensive side of the football.
Yeah, you know, again, the thing that really stands out is just the depth and the number of guys we're playing. You know, we're playing 9 guys on the defensive line, you know, 7 to 8 linebackers, depending on the position. We're running a 3 safety look. We run the 3-3-5. And so, you know, we're playing about 8 safeties and 4 corners. So there's just a lot of depth, a lot of competition over there. And it's the same thing. Those guys are really being very selfless in how they're doing things. But Connor Johnson is playing really good football right now. And he was our player of the week on defense. Just they're playing really hard. I think we're doing a good job of not giving up big plays in the pass game. I think we're doing a pretty decent job of leveraging the football. And I think we're tackling really well right now. And so, you know, I go back to the Central Missouri game and even last week a little bit. You know, the stat line isn't showing you maybe a ton of sacks. But I think we're doing a really good job of consistently getting the quarterback off his mark, making him uncomfortable and making him move his feet. And so, you know, to me, that's just as important as getting sacks.
Sure.
Coach, you mentioned that UCM game, but obviously start the season with Langston and then get the big test with number 2 ranked team in the country coming to town. Also, you mentioned Josh Laberson earlier. Obviously, he's worked with you a lot over the years. Just take me through that game a little bit and just the confidence you got from that and going against Lambeau and his offense with Zabrowski. They're slinging it, obviously.
Yeah, I think we, you know, first and foremost, I think we had a really good game plan. I think we played complementary football, and we executed in all 3 phases: offense, defense, special teams, and we didn't waver from what we were going to do. You know, we said we were going to be very aggressive. We went for it multiple times on 4th down on their side on our side of the 50. You know, and I was just really proud of our kids because I thought they embraced that, you know, guns up type mentality and go get them. And, you know, the good thing is if you followed the game very closely, there was a pretty big momentum swing in the second half where they really started making a comeback. And, you know, obviously with their quarterback, he's super special. And I think they have a really good offensive line and good running back. So I was just really pleased and proud of our coaching staff and our players because I thought we weathered the storm and we didn't deviate from the game plan. And, you know, we continued to play hard. And bottom line, we just said we were going to play to win. And I think when you play against a dynamic team like that, I think you have to have that mindset.
Coach, there's a lot of folks who tune into our program who don't necessarily know a ton about Central Oklahoma and the football program there. And, we kind of felt obligated to show them this video
Yeah.
here where, you guys have, top five facilities in Division II easily. You take a look at, you guys can fit, over 10,000 people in the stands. You've got a tremendous view here, the backdrop and everything else that comes with it. Tell us a little bit about how this asset, your venue, helps you really recruit,
Yeah, no,
to your program.
yeah, for sure. When I got the call from our athletic director Stan Wagnon, initially I was like, I just had this, real honestly, I just had this not great vision of UCO, because when I was at Northwest Missouri State and we played there, it was, I think you could argue, one of the worser jobs in the MIAA. And alum by the name of Chad Richardson from Tuttle, Oklahoma. He wrestled at the University of Central Oklahoma, loves UCO, owner, CEO of Paycom, that's just really came in and not just changed the complexity of our football program, but the wrestling program. The wrestling program has always been phenomenal here, but you could just go up and down the business department and he's just been very generous to UCO. And so we're the third largest university in the state of Oklahoma, OU, OSU, and then us. We're bigger than Tulsa and Oral Roberts. Edmond's a city of 122,000 people, and we're literally like 9 miles from Oklahoma City. So great university, forensic science. We're the #1 forensic science program in the country, and we have a lot of other 123 majors, I think. So it's not hard to recruit young men here. Oklahoma kids they love Oklahoma. And so a kid in the state of Oklahoma, if he can't play at OU or OSU, I mean, I really think we're going to have a good chance to get them. I think we beat a lot of FCS schools at times on recruits. And so having the facilities that we have, combined with the education that we can get here and our location, it's just, it's a good thing. And we're going to continue to recruit the state of Oklahoma. Oklahoma high school football is really good. A lot of the kids still play 3 sports. Wrestling's huge here. And John knows, when I was at Northwest, just my love for high school wrestlers and making them college football players. If you can wrestle, wrestlers are extremely tough people physically and mentally. And so we got a lot of, if you look down our roster, the number of guys that we have on our roster that were ex-wrestlers, whether they were from Oklahoma, Kansas, there's quite a few of them.
And Coach, you kind of talk about everything that's going on there in Edmond, but these last few years, I think we talked about at Media Day too. What's that growth of the program been like, and what have you seen? What have been areas that have surprised you, or kind of take us through kind of building that program into what's going on now there?
Yeah, the challenge here has always been, like, if you look at the coach before me, it's always been kind of hard they've always had a history of a high turnover rate with the assistant coaches. And that's just challenging, and then the strength program has been a little bit of an issue here. And so this is the first year where I really feel like the continuity with our coaching staff, I just feel like we're all in line between our admin staff, strength and conditioning, our medical personnel, our coaching staff, our assistant coaches. I just feel like we're very cohesive. I feel like we work really well together. And, I'm having a lot of fun right now. It's a lot of fun to get up and go to work every day. We got a tremendous team. I love our leadership council, and love the guys I work with. I love my bosses, and we've just got a really, really good formula. And so it's exciting times right now in Edmond.
You talked about having a lot of fun right now. I talked to a good friend of yours, Matt Webb, the other day, and he told me I needed to ask you this question. But talk to me about the CEO chain. Talk to me about the swag going on the sideline right now.
Coach, you weren't going to get away with coming on the show without this coming up.
Oh, it's been a talking point around a couple football programs I follow up here.
Well, so one. Coach Webb, there's currently a CEO chain in the mail heading to Matt Webb.
He's going to wear that. Me and
Yeah,
Matt
oh,
Trenton
for
are
sure,
going to get
for
on
sure.
him on
For
that.
sure. I gave Coach Lamberson a hard time. I walked out to midfield, and he kind of looked at me, and I said, "You like it?" Yeah. I said, "Would you wear one?" And he said, maybe. And I pulled one out of my back pocket and gave it to him. So honestly, it just started with our players. Our players were giving me a hard time, telling me I have zero swag or zero drip, and they told me I wouldn't wear a chain. And so I ordered it, wore it for a scrimmage. My wife and daughters absolutely hate it, but the players like it, so I'm going to continue to wear it.
Does it replace the towel now? Your signature towel was kind of the go-to for so long.
Yeah, I think this has replaced it.
Well, Coach, let me ask you. You've got upcoming. You guys have Fort Hays as your next opponent. When you guys throw on the film from them, what do you see? What do you guys need to most prepare for, other than yourself? Getting yourselves ready.
Yeah, for sure. No, I've always said this. When I turn on their film, the way they play football epitomizes who their head coach is, and I mean that in a very positive way. I
Sure.
competed against Chris. He's a tremendous competitor. He's physically and mentally tough, and he embodies that, and it resonates through their football team and the way they play, whether it's offense, defense, special teams. And we were talking about today, they're tremendous on special teams, and every time they get a chance to try to block a kick, they try to do it. Well, Chris is in charge of the special teams, and if you look at his career, I don't know how many kicks he blocked as a player, but it was a bunch. And so it starts with that. I think they're just really physically and mentally tough young men, and they play extremely hard, fundamentally sound. They're very well coached, and we've got a big challenge in front of us. They're the statistically number one defense in the conference, and but it starts to me with their O&D lines. I think they're very good. I think their quarterback makes great decisions. I think they've got good talent around the quarterback. Their slot receiver's really good. The tight end's good, and they just don't make mistakes. They're not going to beat themselves. And so if you're going to beat Fort Hays State, you're literally going to have to beat them. It's going to have to be a legit win. And, we can't be -3 turnover margin. If we do that, we're not going to win that game. And so, we're excited for the challenge. We went out there last year, and, we talked about that today. We got curb stomped last year when we played out there. And so, I think our guys are excited and hungry for the challenge.
Well, I really appreciate you coming on with us, Coach. You got one of the top games coming up this week. You guys are off to a 3-0 start. Really good stuff. And, I think a lot of people have been thinking, okay, is AD going to really get that thing going there at UCO? And I think we got something going here, Coach. So appreciate you coming on with us. John, I'll give you final thoughts.
Yeah, Coach, I appreciate you coming on. Obviously, I just missed your time covering you here in Maryville, but it's always fun to talk football with you. And just thanks for joining us.
Well, I appreciate you guys, and I appreciate what you do for Division II football and the notoriety you give to it and to the MIAA. And I just want to take an opportunity to give a shout out to Brandon Meisner. I've known Brandon for many years, and what he has done for Division II football and small college football, I don't know how you could measure it, but Brandon, we love you, and continue to pray for you to get better. And I'm excited for the time I can give you a hug again and see you on the sideline at a football game, brother. So hang in there and keep fighting.
Appreciate you, Coach, and good luck this week. Thanks,
you. Guys. I really appreciate you. Have a great week.
You too. Well, there you have it, buddy. We've got we'll talk a little bit more about their contest, a little bit later. But great for AD to make time for us, and obviously looking out for our guy Brandon as well.
Obviously, we both second those thoughts on Brandon, and looking forward to seeing him at a game in the not too distant future, hopefully.
Absolutely. Well, let's go ahead and finish up the rest of the action that we had this week. Central Missouri going to Davenport. We had a feeling, John, that this could be a dangerous game, or at least the host did. I had I'm just not sold right now on the Mules defense. I know they're going to score a lot of points, but it feels like they're having to do a lot of firefights right now. How did you see this one?
But they had the defensive player of the week, so how can't you be sold? But no.
Oh, I see what happened there.
Anyway, I mean, it's Davenport has scored more than 32 points just 3 times in the last 2 years. So and those games have been against Truman, or no, excuse me, those games have been against William Jewell, not a traditional power, Mary, and Wayne State, the less good one, the Michigan one, not the Nebraska one. So I'm still worried about that defense for UCM right now. The offense, 32 points is a pretty low day for them, but they struggled a little bit with some turnovers. I mean, Zabrowski had an interception. He certainly doesn't do that every game. And but still a good game by anyone else's standards, an amazing game, but
right.
Only 350 yards. That's the first quarter in some of these games for Zabrowski. So Davenport limited them a little bit. They're dealing with quite a few injuries right now. I know they're a little beat up at the skill guys around them, and I think they're missing alignment as well. So they're getting healthy, but the Mules definitely aren't firing at all cylinders right now. They're not playing like they were to end last season, and I think the anticipation going into the year was that, it would just carry over. You got Zabrowski back, year 2 for Lambeau. And it's been a little bit more difficult than maybe anticipated going into the year on that. But we'll see how that goes with I mean, it kind of all depends how UCO turns out a little bit, because maybe that's not that bad of a loss. Right now, I don't think that's a very bad loss for them.
Right.
They just have to kind of get it rolling to avoid any more bumps in the road. But not a great week for them, but it's kind of like Emporia, survive in advance.
Yeah, and I mean, so much of this, John, is they have set such a high bar of expectation. I mean, a year ago, you could have made a case that they were maybe the second best team in Division II football. At least made a case.
I've made that case. I believe that case.
Yeah, so when you look at it, through that lens, it's a little different. Now, are they 2-1 and are they still moving on? Of course they are. So, this doesn't hurt them at all. But it's a lot closer than most people would have guessed.
They made a lot of additions to that defense too. So maybe those come together as the year goes on. There's still hope for that side.
Well, now, who haven't we talked about yet?
I was going to say, this is all you.
Well, I mean, we hadn't had a chance to talk about the Bearcats yet. I wasn't sure, John, if we were supposed to cover our eyes this week or if we were supposed to watch or what team was going to show up. And what happens? 59-0. By the way, didn't you pick the other team?
If you're Missouri Southern, you'd like to cover your eyes. Oh, I have heard about picking the other team. We have
good.
We might have to change the rules on how my little gimmick of picking against Northwest and how it's working out.
Yeah, you and Rich had your gentleman's agreement and all that stuff where you go ahead and you do him a favor. I know how it works.
We'll get to that later in the broadcast here, but I'm picking against them again in the paper, but I'm not so sure we'll have that for the podcast picks. But no, they got going. I mean, the first 6 drives, no first downs for Southern. They had 3 drives where they had a first down in the entire game. Cross midfield once, got that field goal blocked. It was a butt kicking.
Yeah.
It looked like when AD was coaching Northwest and when whatever it was 5 coaches ago were coaching Southern. And I thought both programs, I thought the Bearcats were capable of putting that on at the beginning of the season. It didn't look like it through 2 weeks. And I honestly thought Missouri Southern was past this. Maybe my pick last week was a little tongue in cheek, but I wasn't expecting this. If I would have picked it, it would have been 7 to 14 points, somewhere in there, maybe Northwest winning. That's where we're set the line. Not 59. That was a statement, and Chris Ruhnke went from being the biggest question mark on the team to he's quickly becoming maybe the strength of that team running through that quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at his numbers, the fact that he is up there with some of the other quarterbacks that, we've talked about in the way we have, whether, it's Zabrowski, Gunnar Gundy, the fact that he's right there with them, that says a whole heck of a lot. And it's, I tell you that they have been an interesting 2-2 ball club so far.
It's boy, you would have not thought if you said the Bearcats were 2-2 going into week. I guess I would have said, okay, they Minnesota State's a really good team. They probably lost the close one there, and then Fort Hays found a way to get it done because they kind of play a similar style, and then they beat. But no, it's been right. It's a turning of the tables between technically week 1 and week 2, and now we'll see if they can continue that momentum this week. But it looked real good this past week.
Well, it makes for an all the more interesting MIAA, that's for sure.
Holy cow, you ain't kidding. That pick'em gets more and more difficult every week, as you will see soon.
Yeah. Now, a team that's been hanging around with some really good squads, two top 10 teams Washburn has been able to play here within a score. And is this some of Pitt, not handling business kind of like we thought they would? Or is this just a whole lot of fight in Washburn and a team that you're going to have to watch all season?
I think I'm choosing to credit more Washburn here, but for Pitt, man, if you were ever going to have a bounce back, disappointing loss to Emporia, you were supposed to bounce back and really get it going against another in-state team with Washburn, and this was a game for obviously the whole game, but it was really in doubt there for a little while. And Pitt managed to pull away, get the win, but that Washburn team is young and they are athletic. They have some speed, and they're a tough team to deal with. And Pitt, we'll see if they can get it to where they're dominant again. It's another kind of like we said before, survive and advance. They survived, but they're going to want to look a little prettier these next few weeks.
Well, and then moving on, this is kind of under the chapter of not a whole lot to see here, but we haven't had a ton of one-sided games in the conference this year so far, and obviously this ends up being out of conference. But any thoughts on your team, Fort Hays, one of your darlings, having a bounce back game here?
You just said it, bounce back game, just like we said with Pitt, a get right game. When Northeastern comes up after a loss, that's the ultimate get right game. 37-0. That defense is really good. That's what made it so impressive when Northwest put up 32 on them. So now, not much to see here. Hayes is a good team, as AD just said. So not a whole lot to talk about. Just a good win for the Tigers, and they move on to bigger games this week.
Well, let's go ahead and take a look at the standings here for the MIAA. Emporia State is up at the top. No surprise. We've been talking about them each week about how they've been able to go ahead and win games. I mean, if you take a look the last 3 weeks, we've had Angelo. They win by 5. They won by 3 against Pitt State, won by 3 again this last week against Mo West. So they are winning all the close games right now, and they're at the top of the standings. Is it what kind of jumps out to you the most as we look at them, almost after a month?
If you look at the top 7 teams, and I'm choosing to jump UCM over Missouri Western because the loss column is really what I look at. How do you control your own destiny there? And if you look at those top 7 teams, they all pretty much still control their own destiny. I mean, team like Northwest still has games with UCO and Emporia. Obviously, Pitt needs somebody to knock off Emporia to cancel that one out and things like that. But there's a lot of matchups between these teams, and I think any one could kind of be a pick 'em on how they go. So I'm guessing the conference standings will look a lot different as the year goes on, and we might have multiple twists and turns in it. But boy, this league right now is pretty exciting, and it is going to be pretty complicated when it comes to figuring out which teams belong in the playoff, figuring out tiebreakers. With it, just feels like we're headed towards some wacky 3-way, 4-way tie at the end of the year for the conference, because all these teams look so evenly matched at this point.
Well, John, I think one thing that we may be heading towards, and this is terribly premature, but I'm going to say it anyway.
Oh boy.
I see this, and I've seen this over the last few years in the Northern Sun, where when you have a lot of parity with those teams up at the top, maybe the top 4 or 5, you run the risk of them beating up on each other in such a way where you don't kind of have much in the way of home games when it comes to the playoffs, and you end up going on the road.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm speculating that there's a real chance of some of that happening, where the teams who represent the MIAA, we may not see a home game out of the mix. We'll have to see, however the other leagues are playing out. But this one seems to have a whole lot more parity, and so does the Northern Sun that I mentioned a moment ago, whereas some of the other leagues don't quite so much.
Well, we talked about it week 0, but going way back to there, that's why that win by Pitt State over Ferris State is so huge.
Mm-hmm.
And UCM managing to get it done against Davenport, those inter-regional games are going to be just massive at this point. There's not really any crossover with the GLVC, and we're going to see how this new format does stuff with that. I think most people acknowledge that maybe those other 2 leagues are above them, and obviously close schedule for the GAC, so there's no crossover there. But having those bragging rights over the GLIAC teams is going to be important when you come down to making the case here later. So
yeah.
it'll be interesting to see how that goes. And just having those non-conference games we've talked about with Northwest. Minnesota State looks like they are fully capable of riding the table. That is going to be huge for their strength of schedule down the road, having one of those losses be to a potentially, we're a long ways from it, but undefeated Mankato team. So there's
Sure.
a lot of good things going on for them. Shadron, to talk about Kearney. We've got a lot to talk about before that, but Shadron looks improved with how they played against Colorado School Mines this week. So lots of those non-conference games all of a sudden are looking pretty helpful when it comes to making your case to get as many teams as possible into that playoffs. But we've got a few more weeks to discuss that.
Well, hopefully you have a few more weeks to get your picks a little bit better. Massey is still winning, which that kind of irks me a little bit. We're gonna have to do something about that. But John, you were 5-1. You extended yourself. You made a kind of a sacrificial pick with when you took Southern against.
We're done with that. I need to catch Witt. We're done.
Well, but keep in mind there is a going record that whatever you pick on this show needs to match up with what's in your column. We can't have you picking 2 different versions and trying to play the middle. We won't have that. So I'm announcing that to the rest of the folks who are on your grid that you guys do.
I hinted towards that earlier. Now you're not going to let me do it, huh?
Nope.
Okay.
You need to play this.
Fair
you
enough.
need to play this the right way. So let's go ahead and take a look at our slate coming up this week. We're going to have 2 games that we look at in depth and kind of do a little bit of a breakdown, and I will let the expert handle that. But we're going to look first at Nebraska Kearney making the trip to Warrensburg, and our friends at Massey. Well, I'll let you go first, and then I will.
I wanted to tell Massey how wrong they were.
Oh well, you know what? I'll give you the line. Okay, I forgot you need a little help. So, Massey has got UCM -11.
Ooh,
How do you see this one?
I was prepared to say not so fast, my friends, and say Kearney's going to keep it closer. I was thinking like a 35-point line or something. I thought Massey would go nuts on us here. No, I've got UCM covering this game then. I've got them 41-24. I like UCM bouncing back, getting a good win. It's at home. I think Zabrowski gets rolling again. And I think they beat Kearney. I think Kearney's improved. I think before the season we would have said a lot bigger spread than what I just said.
Sure.
But I think UCM at some point is going to get it going, or just simply at least outscore people enough to get it going. I don't think the Lopers have the firepower to keep up in this one.
The thing, I agree with you on, I'm about the same where you're at on your score. The thing I'm probably most concerned about is Kearney gets after the quarterback a little bit. And I do have a concern. Zabrowski they got after him a little bit, with UCO. And I'm curious to see how Kearney does with that. Davenport did a little bit also. So that's kind of one thing to kind of watch out for, but I have Central eventually kind of running away in this one. We're gonna skip over Emporia Northwest because we're gonna look at that in detail in a minute. We've got Washburn, who has been playing everybody tight, at Missouri Western here in St. Joe. How do you see this one? I don't know if this one's quite as easy to pick as everyone might think.
I think it's kind of a toss-up, and I think I would have picked it the other way before the last couple of weeks. Missouri Western lost Brandon Hall to injury. I've heard potentially season-ending there, and their starting quarterback Kane Donovan to injury. Now they've been rotating 3 quarterbacks, so takes an option off the table though. But Brandon Hall might be the best running back in the conference. We've talked about him a lot before. I think he's really good. So I just don't know how Missouri Western's can score going forward. They have a good receiving core, but their line is really young and new, and those quarterbacks haven't shown too much thus far, and that's with Hall behind them. So now without that, how do you kind of throw that in there? So I didn't skip ahead on my sheet here. I've got Washburn 24, Western 13. I think they could score enough. They have a lot of speed. I do think Western's defense is better than maybe we thought they might be going into the year, but I'm just worried about that offense.
So you've got Western, correct?
I said Washburn. 24.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I misheard you. Okay. Mo West is a 6-point favorite in this one. Massey is taking them. Yeah, it's taking them with the 6. I think this is going to be a really tight game. I don't have them covering, but I got Missouri Western winning a 34-32 type game. I got Mo West still hanging on and winning here. Missouri Southern against Northeastern State. I'll just let you handle the pick here. Well, you know what? Missouri Southern. Yep, Matt Massey. Let me have Massey's pick first. They got Southern by 18.
Okay. I have Southern covering that spread. It was ugly last week, and there were some hanging heads on the Southern side by the end of the first quarter. It was not a pretty performance, but as we said with Hayes, and I'm not comparing Southern to Hayes. Hayes is a much better team, but when you need a bounce back, having the Riverhawks on the schedule is a good team to bounce back against. I have Southern winning this one 42-13. I think they find a way to get that offense going a little bit more. And until last week, Southern was extremely competitive in all their games. Even against Pitt, they competed in that game. I think Coach Bradley gets them back on track, and they get a win here, a much needed win, because if somehow they don't get this one, it's going to be a long season in Joplin.
Yeah. I think Southern bounces back. I'm not sure this is a huge spread, but I do think it ends up being a little bit higher scoring game. I've got a 40-35 finish with Southern winning on the road. Now, the final game we have, Fort Hays State and Central Oak. We're going to go ahead and we'll take a look at that right here. I'm going to go ahead and pull up. We have a little bit of a breakdown there And we're going to look at that game, and we're also going to look at the Emporia Northwest game here in a moment. So we got Fort Hays State 3-1 at Central Oklahoma 3-0. Now, you had a chance, John. You were going ahead and looking at the numbers before the show. When you compare these two teams side by side, what are some of the things that jump out to you?
I mean, 250 more yards total offense per game is a lot for UCO.
Yep.
We have to remember that one of their 3 games is against an MIAA opponent in Langston. But holy cow, those numbers are impressive for UCO thus far. And I mean, one of them was against the number 2 team in the country too, who we at the time, who we have questions about their defense now. But it's still an impressive showing by if you were doing your X's thing, I think it would be leaning pretty heavily to Central Oklahoma in this matchup, just with that offensive firepower. Now, Hayes' defense, they are going to try to muck this thing up and make it a dogfight. And if they can stay in it and maybe try to wear down UCO, that's kind of how you keep this game tight. And I think they'll be able to do that to a degree. My pick going in is UCO 35 and Fort Hays State 27. So I think they're going to be able to keep this thing closer than I'm guessing maybe Massey has it. Although Massey might be more in years past thinking about UCO struggling a little bit more than Hayes does historically. So I'm kind of curious what Massey has on this.
Well, Massey has this one. Let's see. This one is UCO -2.
Okay.
So
I have to cover it, but
yep. And so in this one here, I picked on our show the other night. I wasn't on, but I submitted my pick nonetheless.
I heard.
Yep, and I'll be honest with you. I feel like I'm having a little bit potential regret here because the more I looked into Central, no, it had nothing to do with my conversation. I know you would be swayed by that, but I wouldn't.
I would be.
And,
I'm talking into things.
I'm wondering if they're really explosive offense and they're more complete than I probably realized. So that has me concerned with my pick.
You can't change your pick. We just talked about this.
But I am going to stay with Fort Hays for my pick. And, I'm going to go ahead and kind of remove our slide for 1 minute, buddy, because I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to bring that back on up here in just a moment. I had to make a quick modification to our visuals. But as I'm doing that, my thoughts is that Fort Hays can go ahead and make this the kind of game where it's a little bit more low scoring. I think they're a very good defensive football team. And that's kind of where my trust needs to be, is that they're going to be able to go ahead and do a little bit of the way Kearney was able to keep that number down in that football game and go ahead and kind of escape with the win there. Now, keep in mind, we've got this game with 2 of your darlings because, Fort Hays and Central Oak preseason, John. I was
that high on Central Oak preseason.
Remember, you were a little bit higher than everybody else, and Fort Hays you certainly were. So now, when I go ahead and I take a look at that, I say, okay, which way is he still have his allegiance towards? And I think we got a chance to just see that. But let's go ahead and pull up our other game, which is Emporia State at Northwest. Now, this one here is interesting because you got a 4-0 team against a 2-2 team. And Emporia last year went to Maryville, kind of hammered them there. I want to say it was a Thursday night game, if my memory serves me correct. And it was kind of a start of a bad window, it felt like, for Northwest a year ago. Is that an accurate assessment, John?
It is. There were things that went into that bad assess, or that was the first game that we saw Chris Ruhnke play. We just talked about how well he's been playing as of late. Mike Hohensee got injured. Northwest was ahead in that game. Hohensee got injured on, I believe, the third drive of the game, with Northwest leading at that point. And Ruhnke got his first college action. And Emporia State was a good team to put him against in that game, because he came out and he threw 4 interceptions. And then Henry Martin came in for him and threw another interception. Northwest threw 6 interceptions in that game. And
Hohensee threw a pick 6, didn't he? Early?
Yes, Hohensee threw a pick 6. That's the missing interception, if you were doing the math in your head there.
See how I'm following you, John? I was able to find the missing interception.
And they were still ahead even after that pick 6, but it's so a lot of things happen in this. Is this the Chris Ruhnke revenge game? You might be able to pick that way, but they played well. Braden Gleason had three touchdown passes. The big thing, though, was Billy Ross Jr.
Yeah, he was over 100 yards, wasn't he?
Exactly, 106 yards. Man, you're an encyclopedia of knowledge over there, Witt. You're impressive.
Okay.
So now with Billy Ross back, Tyler Commons back, obviously the new thing is no more Gleason. So that's the question. And if you look at these numbers, the thing that amazes me is look at that passing offense. It's actually Northwest with the edge. We would have not guessed that coming into the year.
Right.
They're leading in all the defensive categories. We would have expected that. But to have the edge in passing offense and to be behind them in rushing offense, that is completely flipped from what we'd assume. And offensive scoring, too, scoring almost a touchdown a game more than Emporia State. We'd have not seen that coming. Now, just like we said with Langston and UCO, there's that Missouri Southern game. But, Missouri Southern's not an NAIA team. They're a legitimate football team here. It's really interesting going in. They've got the edges.
We're going to need for you to land the plane. Which one are you going with?
The edges there. Well, I don't want to pick it because I was telling you that I wanted to go the other way on it. I am picking, though, Emporia State to win this game, partly because you're making me. And,
I'm not making you pick Emporia.
And partly, it's already been submitted to the paper. I'm picking Emporia. I had to get back to my screen, too. That was also for the delay. I'm picking Emporia 28-27. I think it's going to be a really good football game. It's a prove it week for kind of both of them after that big win at Pitt, and then for Emporia, and then that big win over Hayes, and then obviously throttling Southern. So it'll be an interesting game to see, and I'm excited to see what you have to think about it.
Well, first off, Northwest is a 7-point favorite according to Massey.
Makes sense. It's Massey always favors Northwest.
Well, and Massey's also, still has something with regard to the last few seasons in their calculation, which would help Northwest more than Emporia in that scenario.
Yeah.
But I have Northwest winning 38-28. And I think we're at an interesting crossroads here where apparently I'm a bigger believer in the Bearcats.
You are.
Than you are, John.
Jake Fisher's dad, who accosted me after the Missouri Southern game to ask me about that pick. No, his dad's a great guy, but he was curious why I picked Southern, and we had to get into it a little bit about why. So now I'll let him know that Witt made me this week. So
I am not taking any of that blame. So, well, let's go ahead and kind of see where the MIAA sits in our top 25. We've gone ahead and highlighted in the silver for any of those who weren't really paying attention to what we were doing here or knew how to do coloring when they were a kid. But we have Pitt State, who actually has moved up a little bit. They moved up really because Colorado Mines, I think, in the eyes of some of our voters, has created a little bit of indecision about how good they are at this point the last 2 weeks. Now, I think they're still a top team, but when we're talking about in that grouping there, that's pretty tough company. Now, Central Mo is sitting right where they were. Emporia State moved up a few spots. I think they almost got a little bit of late respect, to be honest. Almost like people didn't really fully consider the fact that they are 4-0 now and everything else. And Central Oklahoma has gone ahead and moved up a few spots. There was 3 teams that had left the top 25 due to losses. And so you saw some adjustments being made there. And that kind of leads us a little bit, John, to our last area we're going to be talking about here, a new segment, MIAA Weekly Mailbag. As you can see, we got a lot of fancy artwork to go along with it, John. It took hours to come up with that. You would not believe. But now we had a question that was mentioned on the Twitter machine today. And you know what? Since we don't really have a comments and do the show, 100% live here, John, I figured this would be as good a time as any to go ahead and kind of have our own version of that. So it said, and this is from Todd, who I believe is the UCO play-by-play guy, if I'm not mistaken. At least that's what he had in his bio. And he mentions here, why is Emporia 4-0, ranked 10 spots behind a team they beat on the road, Pitt State 3-1? So let's go ahead and address that question first. The other one is going to be, why is UCO ranked 12 spots behind a team that they beat by 17 points, Central Mo? Am I stupid, or is this poll? Well, let's go ahead and kind of unpack a little bit of this. So if we move back for one moment to the top 25, there's a few things that go into this. I always say that a team's ranking is not just all about that one outcome they've had, meaning the one game between them. So, like, if I take a look at our top 25 and I look at our voters that we have, it's a healthy collection from across, different regions throughout the country. And I always say, keep in mind, these aren't standings. These are opinions. And each game kind of offers certain judgments that get placed on teams. Now, we just talked a minute ago, John, about Colorado Mines. They're still undefeated. But that doesn't mean that they are locked in at the 5 spot and they couldn't possibly move one way or the other just because they're winning. So we're early enough in the year where, Minnesota State Mankato, they started the year at 11. They've passed quite a few teams because of the quality of wins they've had along the way. So I think we need to keep that in mind. And then, the top 10 respect that teams get takes a while to get there. And at the end of the day, it becomes a, how good do I think this team is in the big picture? And I think when you look at a Pitt State and the fact that, yes, Emporia beat them, Pitt State outgains them 100 yards in that game, has a few turnovers. So I'm not sure if it was a decisive win for Emporia. At the same time, Pitt's got a really, really quality win, kind of taking it to Ferris State, who we already know is a very known quantity. And so it's one of those things where when you have this much evidence over the last year of how good a team is, like Central Mo, we talked about them earlier, how good we felt they were coming into this year. Well, we're not just disregarding it. They still have the same quarterback and a lot of weapons. So you got Central Oklahoma, who was a 5-6 team a year ago. Well, they've got three contests played so far, 2 against D2 opponents. I don't think that you can just go ahead and have that big of a knee-jerk reaction, John, and just all of a sudden put them ahead of a team who showed so much coming into this year. Because, if we were to take a look at this big picture, do we think still that Central Oak and Emporia are going to finish ahead of Central Missouri and Pitt State? Because that's essentially what we would be saying. And I think that's kind of the question. Do we really feel that Emporia is going to finish higher than Pitt this year? And so yeah. It brings up some interesting arguments because it's not just about that one game.
I think they're different questions. As far as the Pitt Emporia thing, Pitt is the top-ranked team I had in my personal poll out of the MIAA. I had them at 5. They're sitting at 5 right now. I think you can't drop them behind Ferris. I think Ferris deserves to be where they're at right now, too. Emporia, that was a super impressive game. They also struggled with a Missouri Western team that's been down and should have lost that game if a kid makes a catch that most college running backs are going to make. So you have to look deeper than just records and scores, like you said. Now, on the Central Oklahoma question, I have them as my second-ranked team out of all of those. I have them ahead of both Central Missouri, who I have 4th in that list, and Emporia, who would be, if you were just looking at MIAA teams, I would have 3rd. I have Central Oklahoma in my top 10, so I'm Mr. Knee-jerk reaction on this. I see that quarterback. I see what he's doing right now, and it reminds me an awful lot of what was going on in Warrensburg.
Sure.
A couple years ago. They have a coach that has 3 national titles to his name. They have a lot going for him at Central Oklahoma right now. So maybe I'm too fast onto that bandwagon, and maybe if they lose to Hayes this week, I will have to dump all the stock and get off that bandwagon. But I really believe what's going on in Edmond right now. So I'm higher on them. And it's not because I disagree with anything you said earlier. It's just I happen to really believe in this Central Oklahoma team right now. So if we're looking at just my personal, which is submitted in this, but obviously, as you said, we have voters from across the nation. And
right.
I watched MIAA football every week, so I'm going to be higher on these teams mainly. I have Pitt at 5, exactly where they are. I have Central Oklahoma as the number 9 team in the country. And that is going to be significantly higher than anybody else does. I realize that, but I'm really high on that team. I have Emporia State at 13, so a couple spots higher than they are, but right in that same thing. And I'm slightly lower on Central Missouri. I have them at 14, right behind Emporia, because I don't trust that defense yet. I think the other 3 are much more complete teams. So that's where I sit with it right now. I realize that I'm higher than everybody on Central Oklahoma, but that's kind of where I sit with it right now, with those 4 teams deserving to be ranked, I think, and kind of where they sit. Now, we've got a lot of season left, and the poll in week 4 or whatever it is isn't going to matter too much at the end of the season. All these teams have plenty of chances to move up and down, but right now, that's the reasoning.
And realistically, the poll doesn't matter at all.
Yeah, it never matters.
It has absolutely no bearing on who gets selected, by the committees for the regional rankings and everything. This is really more of just what a group of people's feelings are as to how good the football teams really are. Yeah. And you mentioned an important point, because there may be people out east who have Carson Newman higher than 25.
I'm sure.
Or Charleston, for example, or even a West Alabama. They may have them as a top 10 team now because of them beating West Florida. So there's
you can look at CSU Pueblo, and they've been very competitive in every game, including against the number 2 team in the country right now. And they're only 24. I bet you RMAC people don't love that, but I mean that's of course the value of bringing all the different voices together in the room, and then going ahead and saying, okay, what do we have if we put all this together? Because there may be a few people in our poll who don't even have Central Oklahoma ranked at this point. In the same way, you're not an East Coast guy. You may have some of the teams from the East Coast where you go, you know what, I'm not sold on them enough yet. But, so much of it is how much do we see every week? And it influences. There's no doubt about it. That's why hopefully it all balances out in the wash. But you try to be as accurate and as knowledgeable across the country as you can be. But, yeah, it's just nobody can watch every single game that gets played. So you talk to people that know that, and you watch the Sunday show, and you hope to figure it out. So
Well, I wanted to go ahead and have a chance for Todd and his question that he brought up on our Twitter to kind of be heard as kind of our own Q&A for a show like this. If I see something, John, that I think has something that's got some legs to it that we want to discuss on how did it get there, I think it's worth bringing up.
Absolutely. Anybody who wants to mess or comment on the video or put it or even send it to Witt or I on social media. If you don't want to put it out publicly, go ahead and do that. It'd be fun to answer some questions and kind of point us in the right direction of what the people are thinking about.
Well, we're still right, John. Let's not get that confused. But
I'm right.
Let's go ahead for a moment and kind of take a look. We always get help with this show, John, via some video, and in this case here, tell us a little bit about who helped us out with some of the stuff we came up with.
Yeah, I really appreciate Landon. You mentioned our little grid picks. Landon's a part of that. He's currently leading it right now, so maybe he should be the MIAA expert on this show and not yours truly.
Yes, I mean, he might be a new guy on the little cube thing. Yeah,
but they do a terrific job there in Topeka. They cover both Washburn and Emporia, so shout out to them. And then Darren with News Channel Nebraska. Every Kearney game they cover it live and do a great job with that. So those two provided us highlights this week, and I really appreciate both of them for sending them in and making sure we had some sights and sounds from the games for tonight's broadcast.
Absolutely, and I know our audience appreciates that as well. But well, that is all we have for this week's MIAA Weekly. Once again, always keep your eye out for my guy Dykstra at the game. Are you going to be? I'm assuming you will be in Maryville covering the contest.
Absolutely, home game this week. If I made the trip to Joplin, I'm certainly making the trip to Maryville.
I was thinking the same
for this, so it'll be a fun one, and look forward to seeing the Emporia team and Coach Higgins, like we talked about last week, and those guys are always really good to talk to and good to catch up with. So,
Coach Higgins will be thrilled that you've gone with the Hornets. I've of course gone with the Bearcats. So, well, you have fun dealing with that, my friend. But once again, thank you for making time, and have your good night.